My name's Laura Gergley, Marketing Manager with McGraw-Hill Canada, and I specialize in science, engineering, math, and computers. All right, so let's get started. Oops, sorry, my slide's being sticky again. There we go. Thanks for attending our webinar, diving deeper into your Connect for AMP course, and how to maximize Anatomy and Physiology Revealed. So why are we hosting this webinar? Well, before, during, and after COVID-19, we know that a lot of AMP instructors struggle with a few course challenges, including students coming to class underprepared, students having a hard time grasping difficult AMP concepts, and instructors finding it hard to bridge the gap between lab and lecture. So the question becomes, how do we achieve student success in our AMP courses? Well, we hope this webinar will help you solution some of these challenges today. So what are some of the outcomes that we want you to leave with today? Well, we actually have three. First up, we want you to learn about Anatomy and Physiology Revealed. Second, we want you to understand how to implement APR in your course. And third, most importantly, we want you to see how APR helps bridge the gap between lab and lecture. So how are we going to achieve these outcomes? Well, let's go over today's agenda. First up, we're going to talk about diving deeper into your Connect for AMP course. This is where Bill will discuss the learning science behind APR, his best practices, teaching tips and tricks, all while demoing APR to help bridge the gap between lab and lecture. And then we're going to wrap up with a quick Q&A. So before I pass this off to Bill, let me introduce him. Dr. Bill Hoover is the Chair of Anatomy and Physiology at Bunker Hill Community College in Boston. For the past 7 years, he's conducted digital pedagogical research under a nationally funded STEM grant, and his research focuses on how students learn and how faculty effectively teach with emerging digital tools. So please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Bill Hoover. Bill, over to you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today. And I want to share my screen with you because I think the best way to, is my screen being shared currently, Laura?
Not just yet. I might be thinking about it.
Do it again. Stop. Okay,
there we go.
Right. Okay. So I think the best way is to actually show you the product live, is to let you see behind the curtain and to understand what Anatomy and Physiology Revealed is. So during the pandemic, I think we all had that incredibly daunting task of, teaching our students, anatomy and physiology without a physical lab. And, that is not an easy thing to do, especially whenever you want a lot of things to be as hands-on as possible. So Anatomy and Physiology Revealed is a cadaver dissection. And how many of you have had the opportunity to use Anatomy and Physiology Revealed in the past, or at least see it in action? Can we get like a quick comment in the chat? Maybe just enter in your chat whether or not you've seen it, used it, have any experience with it at all, because that'll kind of direct exactly how I, proceed with our presentation today. Laura, are we getting any feedback yet?
Yeah, actually, yes, have used it for labs for several years. That came from Annette, and then and Dave have used it since it was first came out on CD. So he has seen it grow.
So yeah, so you some of you seem to have had some good experiences, but I would say some of the things that were limiting, number one is that nothing auto-graded or let's say spoke to your grade book. Okay, students could quiz inside of APR, but they could never get, say you as the instructor couldn't get the results unless they printed their results as a PDF. So sort of a workaround that we were doing for a while was, creating a file attachment assignment and having the students submit them. But, that became very cumbersome, especially if you have a large number of students each semester. So APR, I was the lead instructor, subject matter expert on this project. And so what I want to show you is some things are similar, but I want to show you some things that are different. And we'll go first into the actual assignment making process. So now that resides in Connect, whereas before you remember over here on the right, you could access it through a widget, right? But it took you to the APR platform, which was, for all intents and purposes, disconnected from Connect. But now, just like you can create, regular quizzes or homework assignments, you can come right here and use the APR assignment tab. Now, the nice thing is that even if you have created, if you've used it for a long time, you can choose a content code. So if you've created a content code, meaning that you set up like a cafeteria style menu, all of the different items that you wanted your students to cover, because my goodness, there's over 6,000, slides in here. You certainly don't want them to cover all of them. You could easily go in and create a code, which I'm sure that you have. And then use that code now in the new assignment, so you could create it, from that code. And then whenever you enter that code, now you're only going to see those structures that you previously were assigning without the auto grade feature. So basically saying that your work has not been lost. You don't have to recreate the wheel. The other nice thing is that if you have someone that you're working with on a project, maybe you're tag teaming, a project, you can share that code with them and then work on the project together. So the first thing I want you to see here, and let's see if I can make it a little bit larger. I don't think I can. Not with, there we go. So the first thing I want you to see is that you have several different activity types that you can assign. Now, I'm going to show you the pedagogy of how I use it in my best practices, but each one of these, I want to just give you a brief discussion. This one is the traditional dissection that maybe you did live with your students, either online or in class, where you can click through structures. You can use the little drag bars, to slowly fade away and dissect, the structures. But we've added something called a 3D model. And this 3D model allows the students to be able to manipulate, rotate, hide, let's say, blood vessels and only reveal nerves, or vice versa, to remove, let's say, bones and or muscles, so that the student has to do more of a scavenger hunt based activity. And we'll take a look at that live. Practice Atlas is an assignment that uses all models, right? So if you typically used models in your classroom, you have access to these models here, and you can assign that right through Connect. And once again, it is an auto-graded assignment that speaks directly to your gradebook. All right. And then if you wanted to include a little animation, especially for things like the muscles, and you want to see the muscle actions, you can assign those right here so that the student knows that if it abducts or adducts, flexes, extends, they'll be able to see that action, and you can require it. And the nice thing about the animations, students cannot scrub through them to get to the end to receive their credit, for that portion of the lab. They have to watch the entire thing. Histology, obviously, if you are approaching this from, a histo, a gross, and then a physiology perspective, you can assign those slides at different levels of magnification. Imaging, if you want to include things like MRIs and, x-rays, you can do that. And then lastly, a quiz, okay? So let's start with our traditional dissection. And whenever we open that up, we can choose, let's say, the cardiovascular system. And then whenever we select a topic, we can say the heart, and we want a view. Now, what you're seeing right now is this is one particular portion of the lab. So you have maybe an anterior view where you want to cover, the internal structures from the anterior view, and that's only one portion of the lab. So you may want an anterior view, a posterior view, and then a lateral view. And each one of those are going to be an independent piece of the lab. So you can basically assign, let's say 10%, credit for completing each of these. But when we click on create the activity, let me bring this back down to a normal size. You have the ability to put in some notes right here if you want to. But the thing that I like here is being able to tailor, the name. This is a quality matter standard. So if you're trying to build online courses and you want to make sure that it is, meeting the quality matter standards for online education, you can put in here anterior view, right? And you can save that. And so now the students know that they're only going to be looking for structures in the anterior view. And then because I already used, let's say, a previous structure list, you'll see that they have already been pre-selected for me. Now, if you wanted to start from scratch, you obviously could. So today, the offer that I'm going to make you, if you've attended this session before, for Basic Connect, I copied courses to you. However, if you haven't received a course, I can copy my whole course to you today. And what you'll get are these pre-checked boxes, which means that when you come in, you can deselect any of these that you want, or you can add structures that you want, that you say, oh, Bill's covered 90% of them, but there's a handful that I would really like to include, or Bill didn't cover, any of the blood vessels, I want to add those. You can make those amendments here. So the nice thing is once again, you get to, let me move this up a little bit so I can see. Once you've given it its name and you've checked off, the items that you want your students to be responsible for, you can continue. And now this is where you get to see that this becomes part of the overall assignment. So the assignment is here, and each one of these activities, which for me, I have a dissection, a 3D model, an animation, and then a quiz. That's a typical lab activity for me. Now, every time I add an activity, this percentage, so if I had a second activity, each one would be worth 50%. Okay. So again, if I wanted to go into the 3D model, I'm basically doing, the same thing. I'm looking at the thorax this time, creating the activity, and things are going to be pre-selected or not pre-selected based on, what I've already created. So I think, creating the assignment is, very, very simple, in terms of, you selecting the structures. But again, if I copy the course to you, most of the main structures will already be, covered, and you can select or deselect to tailor it to your personal liking for your class. Any questions about the assignment creation portion? I didn't want to spend too much time there because it's more, logistical and just checking off boxes. What I'd rather spend more time is showing you what it looks like from a student's perspective and how you can avoid, let's say, tech issues with your students. So as you can imagine, when a student's taking your course and they're doing something digital for the very first time, there's, a learning curve. So if they come into, this dissection and there's 4 activities, as you can see here, there's a dissection, there's a 3D model, there's an animation and a quiz, just like I mentioned, they need to learn how to navigate each of those and to take advantage of the tool sets, that are available in APR. So what I've done, and I'm willing to share these with you, is I've created the videos, the how-to videos from a student's perspective. This isn't a commercial version. This is as if I was a student who was doing this assignment for the very first time. What do I need to know? How can I complete this, with the best efficacy and with the best results that will prepare me for the quiz? So each one of these, again, you should use these. You don't have to, but I strongly suggest that you do, is that I created the videos. And again, it walks it through a student's perspective from clicking on the assignment to the very end. So you'll see that in just a moment. So they can expand this, right, to full size. And we'll do that. And you'll see that the student is, beginning from the very beginning.
The first part of your lab. This lab is to be completed as an Anatomy and Physiology Revealed lab, as you can see here.
So I'll pause that. But what I want to show you is that, anytime you scrub through this, you're going to see every single aspect of what a student is going to experience, from logging in the first time, finding the structures, using things like changing the highlighter, All of those things are included in the tutorial, that the student will have. So that way, there's no excuse for them to not be able to complete this lab. It's like a walkthrough from soup to nuts of every single feature that the student is going to need. Okay.
Well, in your experience, I have a question. How would this tutorial video help sort of alleviate some of the administrative tasks for yourself and instructors alike?
Yeah, well, you can imagine in the pandemic, the big issue that we had was bringing our instructors on board, right? So, a lot of them have never taught with digital tools before. So this gave them, not only the students, but gave them the opportunity to be able to see how to use these tools. But more importantly, whenever students are completing these activities, boy, would your email box get filled with, things like, if I, expand this again, students might say, what are all of these little toggle, buttons down here? What happens if I click on them? What is this red dot? And so, this is where the fadeaway comes, so if you grab this red dot and pull it down, it's going to make, certain structures disappear and reveal other structures. Things like something I've already seen has a check mark next to it. So to be able to move on to the next activity, you have to, click on each structure to identify it. Those are all things that students would be filling your emails with, right? So instead of you answering questions about technology all of the time, via your emails, you are getting, this type of a presentation that, explains everything to your students. So it alleviates those nightmare headaches of, answering, 100 different questions about the tech. So it makes life so much easier, and students can access this, any time of day, day or night. Now, the other thing, Laura, to, piggyback on that question a little bit is, you'll see that I've asked a few questions here. So this basically is not just a tutorial that you have no idea if someone watched it, but I ask questions that, let's say, showed up in emails, the most frequent, right? So if a student says, I couldn't get from activity 1 to activity 2, and I spent 2 hours. It's so stupid. I don't understand why. Well, right here it says you must click on every structure in the structure list to receive full credit and be able to move on to the next activity, right? So you're reaffirming the things that you want them to be sure they know, because if you don't, you're going to have an email box full of questions about, how to use this platform. Okay, you really want them to spend more time learning, about the anatomy. So, again, they would say true and they would move on. And, again, once students have been asked these questions, they feel very comfortable, answering them and then using the platform. So things like a check mark will appear next to the structure once you've seen it. And that's how they know that they've seen all of those structures. Right. And then there's some nuances, Laura, that, whenever they're going through this, you need to scroll, because right now, let's enlarge it again, just for a second. You'll see that there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 structures. But you need, in the video, I explained this, that you need to scroll down. So take your 2 fingers and scroll down so that you can see the additional structures that you're responsible for. Because the students will keep clicking go to activity 2 because they see all the check marks there. So that's a pain point for them. So going over all of those pain points in the video makes their experience and then your email box, a lot better.
Thanks for taking us through that, Bill.
Absolutely. So, from the student interface and the student experience, you're going to get, a better quality of, feedback from your students. They're going to say, boy, I'm glad I watched those videos. And I suggest, like on the first day, that you walk them through it and you can create what we call prerequisites. So if I check all of these boxes and come up here, and I'm not going to go through the whole process, but if I create a prerequisite and I add that, what you're going to see is that students won't be able to do the dissection until they get, let's say, 100% on this part, because then students can say, well, you never told me what I needed to do to be able to create this, or to be able to complete this lab. Well, if you create these, right, and now the students have to watch all of those videos before they, can actually complete the dissection. So that's one way of making sure that on day one, your students are capable of completing the lab. Okay. So that's a little tip and trick that I think, will save you a lot of headaches, with your students. Because once again, if you're not with them all of the time, they're definitely going to, run into those types of issues. So you can take care of those with these self-help videos. So each one of these are covered. Now what I want to do is I want to show you live what the activity looks like from the student's perspective. So we addressed how to do the 3D dissection, how to access the animations and complete them, and then how to get through the quiz with 100%. And then I'm going to show you, I need to go in from the student's perspective. I'm going to show you some of the tips and tricks that are in those videos live that help the students whenever, well, I guess you can probably say, students, right? And all they want to do is get their points. And if they want to get their points, they're just going to try and game the system to get through it. So we're going to access this lab right here, the Heart Dissection Lab. And we're going to briefly take a look at each of the 4 components of the lab. Okay, so the first one you're going to see is very similar to the dissection that you're used to, whether you let it, on a smart board, in front of the class while they had their, heart dissection trays in front of them. You're going to see that this is very similar to what you're used to. So again, here are the instructions that kind of tell them everything that they know, but you know what students are going to do. Close that, right? They're not going to pay attention to it at all. So then whenever they come over here, hopefully they've watched the video, know that they have to see each of these structures. Now I'm going to show you the good, bad, and the ugly. So in the old version of APR, when you clicked on a structure, you'll see that it lit up in a certain color. But let's just say that you're colorblind and blues and greens aren't, good for you. I show them in the video how they can come over here and choose a different color from the palette to change that color that's more convenient for them. I also show them that instead of just clicking each structure and getting all of their points, right, which trust me, students are going to do that. But remember when I said you had to scroll in the video? Look at that. There's more structures. But this is what students are going to do. They're just going to click all the way through, and you're going to say, boy, that's not a very good, dissection, Bill. That's not what we're expecting. But don't worry. We're going to fix them, as we get through this. Okay, you're going to see how this comes back to haunt them a little bit, in terms of them not doing what they're supposed to. But again, I show them how they can once again change that color palette, how they can take a picture of this image. If you're going to give them, let's say, a lab practical, in person, they can take photos of this. They can find more information about this, meaning that if they have English as a second language and they want to hear the pronunciation of that structure, I'll play it.
Opening of inferior vena cava.
So, that really is helpful, to students to know what to do. And then if there are any animations that are associated with it, they can click here and that will bring up the animation, a fly through, of the heart, that shows them all of the different structures and the blood flow. But now this is where I think the video is really helped, the tutorial. Where did all my structure lists go? How do I know if I'm done? Right? And I show them in the video that they have to click on the clipboard to get back to the structure list, right? So you can imagine how frustrating that would be for students to come here and then not know how to get back to their structure list and know if they were, finished with the, with the activity. I also show them that if you want to quiz yourself, because this is what happens. They click through everything. And by the time they get to the quiz, they're like, oh, geez, I wish I would have paid more attention. And I only got a 50% on the quiz and I need to have 100 to get credit, for this lab. Well, you'll see that there are about, I think, around 40 structures that they're going to be tested over. Well, now this is very similar to what you've done in a traditional lab. Let's say you have a lab practical and then you set up an open lab for practice. What would they do? You would put pins, right, on all of the main structures that you wanted them to be responsible for. You'd create a little master, guide. Pin 1 is, opening of the pulmonary valve. Pin 2 is, and you would just give them a list and they could practice. Well, it's the same thing here. If they hover over the points, they can quiz themselves and see if they can remember what those structures are. And then if they want to know what are the boundaries of those structures, when they click on it, they will get the whole structure to light up, right? So if they want to know how big is that fossa ovalis? Oh, there it is. It's not very big, right? Or the opening of the inferior vena cava, right? So they can get the dimensions, the chordae tendineae. Oh, that's more than just one of these strings. It's all of them. They all form the chordae tendineae. So I show them that this is a great way for them to practice before they get to their quiz. So the good news is that even if they fail their quiz, they can come back to this open lab practical and be able to quiz themselves and make sure that they know each of the structures that they're seeing, okay? So let me pause there before I move on to the next activity in the lab. Does anyone have any questions about this traditional dissection, right? Because I show them that they can even drag the slide bar to remove, more and more portions of the heart, set new pins, right? So that they can practice in the deeper levels, right? I show them this all in the tutorial because there isn't one, right? So if I do that, now again, I'm looking at 2 new structures. And if I want to know exactly what they are, I can click on them. But this gives the students an opportunity to explore. Do we have any questions? You can unmute yourselves or put something in the chat.
Haven't had a question come up just yet,
Okay.
but if anyone does, we'll give it a few seconds.
Yep.
All right.
So I didn't think that there would be lots of, questions on that one because I think, for those who've been using it, it looks very similar and it works and functions exactly the same that it did in, in APR 4.0. Now, here's the one that I absolutely positively love. This is the 3D, okay? So if you're talking about 3D, you can hide things or you can show things to make the dissection more interactive, right? So here we see the blood vessels, right? Here's coronary vessels, but here we can make them go away so that we can see things that are underneath, okay? We can show the external surface of the heart, or we can hide it so that you can see inside a little bit more. And I describe this as a scavenger hunt for the students because if I come down to, let's see if we can get to aortic valve. Okay, what I want to show you is that aortic valve is not visible when we click on it like it was in the regular dissection, is it? See? So this is more like a traditional lab where if the student was holding the heart, right, gloved of course, and they're holding the heart and you told them to find the aortic valve, then they would have to rotate it, they would have to manipulate it, they would have to remove, a flap, and then they would have to basically, try to see if they could find it. And they say, oh, geez, I wonder why I'm not finding this. And if you're leading this in a synchronous environment, which is what I do, I say, are you even looking in the right place? And they would say, I don't know. And I'd say, well, take a look at this is the right ventricle. And you can tell because the wall is so thin, right? So if they say, well, I can't really see that. Well, then you can scale it up so that they can see it, a little closer and they can see that this is a very, very thin wall. So I say, now let's maneuver it and bring it over and say, oh yes, there is the left ventricle. And once again, I say, how do you know? And they say, wow, look at the thickness of that ventricle compared to the thickness of the right. Very, very small, very, very thin. So then we come back over here and they say, well, Dr. Hoover, where is that aortic valve? We're in the right side of, or the correct side of the heart. Well, once again, we see here, it's the red kind of blends in a little bit. So we say, well, let's change that color to purple, right? Oh, there it is. Okay, now I see it. But you see that they had to actually manipulate the heart to be able to find it. It didn't just light up for them, the way that it did on a regular dissection. Okay. So once again, chordae tendineae of the atrioventricular valve, you know, the left. Well, they're on the right side. And they're saying, I don't see it. I don't see it. Well, once again, scavenger hunt. You've got to find it. You've got to manipulate the heart. You've got to rotate it. You've got to lift it up, right? So you get them to utilize, you know, the tool very much like they would if they were in a regular lab. So any questions about this 3D heart?
We do have one question that did come in. I do know about the orientation tutorial video for the APR in general, but how to keep it for each system and organ dissection?
Yes, that would be something that you would want to either have someone like me create, which I know McGraw-Hill has a very good implementation specialist team that can do narrations for these, but I'm more than happy to do these, you know, for you as well. And it would depend on what you wanted to accomplish with that video. So from my perspective, I don't actually want to do the full dissection for them, you know, let's say for each individual organ, because I feel like you'll be leading them to the answer. I want them to kind of look for these things, you know, like I just demonstrated for different organs. So if they know that, you know, the color change, you know, makes it easier to find, well, then they're going to have to do a little bit of investigative work. They're going to have to turn and manipulate and maneuver the heart. So for me, I've only created one type of, you know, how-to video for, let's say, the 3D model, just showing them the feature sets, you know, meaning how do I rotate this? So if you're looking at the screen, you know, I can rotate it left to right, right? I can rotate it up and down to help find whatever it is that I'm looking for, right? And then I can even, you know, move this to the left or to the right, and then I can zoom in or zoom out, you know, on any particular view. So I want them to actually be more exploratory, but that's up to you. If you would like them to have a complete dissection where you're walking them through, you know, here is the, you know, tricuspid valve, here's the pulmonary valve, and then you rotate it around. You can do that, but I don't know that you would want to, you know, give that away. You would sort of want them to hopefully, you know, explore those things. Does that answer your question, I hope? But the long and short of it is whatever you want, you know, in the way of a how-to video, those can easily be created for you. You don't have to do it yourself. It's very easy for someone like myself who's authored in this tool. You know, that's the luxury of Laura bringing me here today, you know, is that I was the original digital author for all of the anatomy and physiology learning objects. So I know how to use the system very easily and quickly, and I can create anything that you would like in the way of tutorials.
Magana, who asked the previous question, said, yes, thank you. That did answer her question.
Good. Well, that's why we're here. So, you know,
absolutely.
Anytime.
And as Bill said, we do have our digital success consultant team who, you know, does strive to support every instructor along the way. So if you guys do have any questions about implementation, setup, even, you know, teaching best practices, you can always reach out to me and we can definitely continue to connect you with our digital success consultant team.
Yep. And sometimes that consultant team might say, hey, you know, maybe it's you want to know the best practices for making the quiz, which we're going to see in just a second. You can actually then schedule a 10 or 15 minute quick, you know, Zoom meeting with someone like myself and say, you know, hey, Bill, you know, I want to know why you did it this way, or why you wouldn't require 100% versus a 90%, you know, and it's just a short commitment of time to get what you want as a final product, right? So
absolutely.
Their success team, you know, support at every step is amazing. You won't want for anything that you want to see, they'll be able to provide it. And again, you'll get someone in the field, you know, not just a salesperson who's trying to get you to use a product. You're going to get someone who effectively uses it and says, you know, here's the best way to get the most out of your students.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that was the, let's see, we need to go to, let's see if I can click here.
Oh, while you're doing that, I've got a message from Dave Cato. Very helpful to use the 3D model within real time with a model of the heart in the lab. So I guess it's a hybrid setup. He says luxury.
Oh, you nailed it. I mean, that's why I teach this, even if I'm completely online, I do it live. You know, I have the students going through portions of maybe not every single structure, but let's say I wanted to, talk about the difference between left-sided and right-sided heart failure. Then I will lead that part of the dissection, talking about that thick left ventricle, and say to the students, which side do you think will fail first, left or right? And they may not know, but you say, well, which one works harder, right? And they might say, well, given the size of the left, it must be the left. And you say, excellent, very good. And so if that left side fails, where does the blood back up? So you can bring in some clinical aspects of the anatomy while you're doing these dissections synchronously. Again, not the whole dissection, that's on them. They need to go in and identify these structures. But if you have specific things that you would like to drive home, I suggest that you use it synchronously, at least for certain portions of it.
And I think too, just hitting home the use case of that, APR can be used both in person and online. The flexibility is endless, really. It really, sky's the limit. Use your imagination. There's not one way to teach these or to leverage them.
That's right. And Laura, I think I would like to share with them what we had talked about before, in terms of what does a traditional face-to-face lab look like? You have 4 to 6 students at a station, and you have 1 or 2 students doing all the work and no one else is. So for accreditation purposes, now, even if you did this, live, you have everyone, let's say, dissecting out the 10 most important structures. Whenever they finish and they hit submit, now you have documentation for your accreditors that not only the 2 students who were ambitious, but all students that were at that station actually went through and identified the structures that they were supposed to for the lab, right? So
Absolutely.
That's where I think, it becomes a very valuable tool, not only for completely online, but for hybrid and face-to-face, because now you are engaging every single student instead of, the 2 that are the most ambitious, the 1 or 2.
And just to drive that home, it looks like Dave's institution is still allowing some in-person, lab time, but they're only allowed 2 students per station. So again, that's really hard to manage. Being able to do both mitigates that sort of challenge and ability to have all students access the same tools and hands-on practice that they all need, really.
Absolutely. So here are the 3D animations, and I will just play a little bit of it, but you can see how beautiful, these animations are. You also have
the normal heart,
caption,
deoxygenated blood flows from the body.
You have the closed caption that for ADA compliance, which I think has become extremely important, not only for your PowerPoint, but for your video lectures. You have to have a transcript that goes with them. All of this is built into the APR platform so that the students have access to it, while they're doing their assignments. And believe me, there have been some big lawsuits that have, come out of schools that haven't been providing, the ADA 508 compliance that's necessary for online learning. So it's nice to know that this is baked into the platform. But what I want to show you here too is that, let's say if I'm a student and I'm in a hurry, right? I just want to get through this lab. Watch what happens when I let go and I try to hit play.
Through the superior and inferior vena cava into the right atrium.
It brought me back. Like I can't game the system and get almost to the end and then hit play and hopefully think that I'm getting out of 3 minutes and 50 seconds, right? Nope.
The blood,
it goes all the way back.
Known as
So for accreditation purposes, once again, how do you let the accrediting bodies know that your students actually did the activities? Well, this is seat time, right? This is a way of guaranteeing, because if, let's say that they've watched 1 or they've watched none, and let's say I'm trying to game it and I come down here and say, go to activity 4. Watch what happens. You have not completed this activity. All animations in the list need to be watched. And that means all the way to the bitter end of each and every animation. So that's a way of making sure, once again, that your students are doing exactly what it is that you've assigned without them gaming the system. Okay. Any questions about these animations? Now, please know that whenever you go to, let's say, the quiz, which is number 4 that we're going to next, activity 4, you can ask questions about just the dissections and the 3D, the dissections, the 3D, and the animations. And then you can even do the practical, the lab models, right? Practice Anatomy Atlas with the models. You can quiz all of those, okay? But let's go on to the last one here, to the quiz. So now the student says, okay, it's time for me to take my quiz. And let's see what it's telling me that I have to do. Ooh, I have to have a 90% or better. Now, what does that mean? It means that if I make this worth 40% of the entire lab. You might say, wow, that's a lot. Well, guess why? Because if they don't get a 90% competency, right? Meaning we want competency-based education. We don't want just a click and, complete. So the student comes in here, they know that they have 43 structures that they have to identify down here in the bottom left, okay? And it says, click on the myocardium of the left ventricle. So number 1, they have to know if this is the left or the right, if this is the left or right, this is the interventricular septum. So they have to click it. And if they click in the right place, they get it right. And you'll see that it lit up green for them. They have 1 out of 1 with a score of 100%. But let's get a couple wrong here, right? We got it wrong. And I'm just going to get these wrong just so that we can see that the, oops, I tried to get that wrong, but I guess I didn't. There we go. One more. Okay, so now we see, oh my goodness, I only have a 40% and I need a 90% to pass. So the student will obviously stop here. And this is in my video tutorial. I tell them, I say, you didn't study. You just clicked through all the structures and you didn't take the time to study them. So I tell them in the video, go back. So they can come down here in the bottom left and go back to what we would consider would be like an open lab practical. So they start from layer 1 and they say, okay, let me make sure that I know all of these structures before I move on to layer 2, because all of these layers are going to have every single structure that I'm responsible for. So then I go on to layer 2, I make sure I know those, just like if I was in an open lab, quizzing myself. And again, I can click on them to show the color that, of the structure. And then whenever I finally get through layer 6 and I say, okay, now I feel like I know all of these, I can go on, to the next, to the quiz and, finish that quiz. But now I will be better prepared. See, so they can't game the system by just clicking all the structures, because it comes back to haunt them when it comes to the time of the quiz. So this is where the best practices come in. Do you take a quiz and only give them 1 attempt? I say no, because I'm going to give them a lab practical eventually. This is organ system by organ system by organ system. So it's pedagogically chunked. And it would basically just be like having a quiz at the end of that day's lab. So for the heart dissection, they're going to go in and do a quiz just of the heart itself. Now, when my lab practical comes, right, that's either you know it or you don't know it, and you only get 1 chance. But for these individual labs, I don't want it to be punitive. I want them to be able to make mistakes. I want them to be able to eventually get all their points, because that's what students are all about, is getting all their points. But at the same time, they're getting all their points, they're becoming competent at knowing all of the structures that were required of them in that specific lab, okay? So I give them unlimited attempts. I require that they get a 90%, and that there's no time limit, on the quiz, because again, this is what I would consider more formative. I want them to be able to go in and become competent so that whenever they do take the lab practical, they're really well prepared. Does that make sense to everybody?
All clear on this end.
Okay, very good.
Bill, we are at 1:45, and I know that we did leave some room for a Q&A. So I'm wondering if we could maybe take 5 minutes back from the Q&A just so that you can continue with your demo.
Yeah.
We're okay to pivot with that.
Yeah. So tell me what you'd like to do now, Laura, in terms of the presentation.
So I think, were you planning to, I guess, end with the quiz side of things?
Yes. So that feature that I just showed you, let me show you from the, whenever we create the add an assignment in that quiz that we were just taking. Oh, I see. I think what you're asking is, how do I give the lab practical?
Yes.
Because we just did the quiz, and that was like, again, pedagogically chunked with unlimited attempts. Well, the nice thing is that whenever I come in here, let's say for a lab practical, I can go to the question bank, and then this is the Saladin textbook, but you might be using McKinley. If you click on this drop down here, you'll see that you can come down to something called the Anatomy and Physiology Revealed question bank right here. So then what I can do is now I can add 3, 4, 5 organ systems all at one time in one particular exam. So if we were doing the cardiovascular system, you know, again, I can choose if I just want multiple choice questions or I want interactives. I can go in here and create, you know, the, you know, let's just say, well, let's call it lab midterm, because we're going to add multiple chapters, you know, multiple organ systems in here. You know, so now I have the ability to, you know, to filter, you know, by topic. I have the ability to filter for question types. I have the ability to, let's see, if we want animation quizzes in there. APR, let's see, section, chapter, module. So I can choose, let's say, the nervous system of the heart, the vascular system of the heart. But basically, I can come in here and choose any of these to build the actual lab practical. So I'll just choose a few from the cardiovascular system and say that that was part. So we can add those, and we can even create a pool, which I strongly suggest, because, hey, you know what, let's make this a little more dynamic. Whenever we're creating this for a lab practical, you see there were 167 questions from the, we probably wouldn't put that many in, but let's say we chose 50, you know, we could put those into a pool where we would call this, you know, cardiovascular, okay? Which I think is really good, because now you're going to say, let's say you have 5, you know, and you're going to choose 20 structures. You want 100 question lab practical out of, let's go with that. 10 questions, but we want to choose 20 questions, you know, for each, right? So we want 1 point apiece. So we add that to a pool. And then when we choose another organ system, we'll create a pool and choose 20 questions. And the reason I'm doing this is to show you that you can give an equal distribution of questions. So let's say we do the respiratory system, and I won't go through all 5 organ systems, but we grab those and we put those into a pool, and we call that the respiratory pool. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second from the organization. And again, we want 20 questions, and we would just repeat this for, let's say, the 5 organ systems that we're going to cover on the midterm or final exam. And then after we're done with that, we can go to something over here called organize assignment. And I think that this is really, really powerful, because you're going to create an equitable, you know, activity, meaning that when students come in here and they come to take your test, there it goes, you'll see that there is a big pool, which means that if 10 students get in the room at the same time and take the test at the same time, they're all going to get 20 different questions out of 164. They're going to get 20 questions out of 247, and they're all going to be different for all 10 students, right? And you'll be able to know that every student got 20 questions on cardiovascular, 20 questions on respiratory, 20 questions on digestive, male reproductive, female reproductive. You'll be able to make sure that someone who was really strong in cardiovascular got, maybe more questions in respiratory. It wouldn't be fair. You want an equitable distribution, and that's the way that you can, create your lab practical. Okay. And again, this is a high stakes assessment. So whenever you come in to set the settings for this, you would obviously not choose it as homework. You would say, I want it as an exam. And then for the exam, you would want to set your settings. And again, in the course that I can copy to you, what you're going to see is that for the exam settings, you have the basic, which I always give them a time limit, right? So if it's 100 questions, they might get 100 minutes. And I would not allow them to print the test. I would want them to scramble the questions so that once again, everybody's getting a different distribution. You could even password protect it, but that's not all that important. Again, one attempt instead of unlimited whenever we were doing the formative lab quizzes, right? This one is either you know it or you don't know it. And then for resources, I wouldn't give them hints or availability to go to the ebook to check. I wouldn't give them anything. I would just give them the question title, right? And how many points each question was worth. And then last, for the feedback. Now you have two choices here. I usually only give total scores, but you could give, what they got right and what they got wrong. That's what this setting is for. And you could hold the feedback until after the exam is given, right? So that way people couldn't share their answers or their wrong answers and their right answers with people who were going to still take the test, right? So these are all best practices that that are built into the actual activity. Okay.
So Bill, a question did come through from Annette, and she asked, can you choose the questions in the pools in case there are questions on structures you may not have covered in the lab or lecture?
Yes, you can add questions, you can take away questions, in that pool. You can even, let me go back to the edit assignment feature here, which I think, let me get rid of that feature. There we go. Apply to this assignment. So I know that there is, some requirements that you might have. Let's just say that there are, let's say if it's 100, let's say 20 questions here, but you wanted, let's say, certain structures to show up on everybody's test, which you said, you've got to know the 4 valves. Then you could choose those, right? You could choose those questions, and I'm just going to pick things here. You could choose those, and you could make those, not part of the pool, and you could make sure that everybody had to answer those out of the 20 questions. So that's number one. But any of these questions, obviously, whenever you are adding the questions, you can, choose anything that you want. Like, you don't have to choose whatever I've chosen. You can limit, the structure list to what you want. So you can edit that in any way that you want to for your lab practical. You don't have to put in 147 questions. You don't have to take all of the structures that were listed there. You could very easily, as I'm about to show you, go into this cardiovascular, and we'll do the multiple choice this time because it's probably a little bit easier to see how that works. Here's all of the different structures, right? And so if you said, oh yes, left atrium is, a must have, pulmonary valve is a must have, you could choose like a cafeteria style menu, anything that you wanted and leave out. the other things. And so let's just say that, we did this for several structures, and then we wanted to add those to the pool instead of having that giant pool of everything, which might include things that you didn't want. You can still create the pool, right? And, you can call it myocardial structures, right? So that way you can tailor the pools to only the structures that you wanted, right? And so we might, only ask for 2 of the 6. So yes, you can tailor this to any way you want. I mean, the options are, pretty much limitless in terms of how you can create this to make it an equitable, test, for your students. Right. And then you get to see all the different vasculature. So again, if we were just looking at, vasculature of the leg, we could filter for that in a matter of seconds. We don't have to go through every single structure. You'll see that we're down to 20 now. That's all we have to look at, which is kind of nice, right? And we could call that vasculature of the leg.
So Bill, Annette says, thanks. That was a perfect explanation and example. So thank you. And Dave's asking, can you add your own question or just from the question banks add to the, can you have customized questions basically?
Yeah, I guess the answer ultimately is yes, Dave. But it would depend on how you would want that question to appear. So if we take a look at this particular question, right, we can edit this question any way that we want to. Right now they're showing, the highlight is the anterior tibial artery. So, if we zoomed in, we could see it highlighted there. We could see it highlighted there. But let's say you wanted more of a lab practical type question, where you just wanted the image with the highlighted structure, and you said, identify the structure that's highlighted above. You can create, your own questions that way. And I have a tutorial that would show you exactly how to do that. Because whenever we, let me see if I can you can add any questions that you want. You can manipulate these questions if you wanted to. Let's say that there were 10 structures that needed to be identified. You could bring it down to 5. I have tutorials that will show you exactly how to do that. I'd give you the tutorial, but I'd also probably, set up, a WebEx with you too, because if I, let me see if I can show you an assignment real fast that would allow you to edit. So let me edit this. Oh, you know what? I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to. I don't think no, I can't, because it's already been taken by one of my students.
Bill, Dave actually said he would be interested in that tutorial. So if you're having, Dave yourself or anyone else on the phone or on the line, not the phone, we could definitely connect you with Bill as well.
Yeah,
after this event.
Yeah, because it is a little technical whenever you're using imagery or you're using, let's say, oh, you know what I can do real fast? If you're using imagery or you're using video, it is just few more little steps that, you would have to go through in the editor itself. But once you do it once, it's the same process over and over and over again. So, it wouldn't be, that challenging, to do. So I'm going to show this to you just real quick, if you guys have enough patience. So I will.
Bill, not for you to answer, but Annette, I just want to acknowledge that you've requested a personal tutorial as well. So I'll take that as a follow-up after our webinar too.
Perfect. I'll be happy to. So just to show you that it's possible. So if I come in here and edit an assignment, and basically this is the same thing you can do from whenever you add a question. So let's say you've added all of the questions that you wanted, but you don't like the fact that they are multiple choice and you want it to be just a lab practical type question. Then what you would do is you would choose that question, and then in here you would click on the editor, right? And then you would have the ability to go in and make the changes that you wanted to inside of the editor. So, again, whenever you're talking about this is where the image would go, and I would walk you through that whole process again. And I have step by step by step, so here's the media that you would, be uploading, into it if you wanted a piece of media, an image of some sort, so it's all possible. You would just need a little tutorial on how to do that, but if you wanted, let's say, just to upload, let's say under the add questions, and you wanted to add your own question, you could do that too, and if it was just like a multiple choice, you could create multiple choice, questions as well. So let's see if I can grab Saladin. There's my Connect orientation videos. There we go. So if we went in here, we could add our own question, like right here where it says create a question. And then you have the palette here that you could create a check all that apply, a matching, a multiple choice. And basically you would be doing that by scratch. You'd be doing it from scratch, file attachment assignments, but again, the idea is that once you created a multiple choice, you could add a piece of media if you wanted right here on this tab. So if you had that image of the heart, you could add that piece of image, that you click on media, and then you would choose a file, from your computer. And whenever you did that, I'll just grab a piece of media, and then you would upload it. And then you would have to choose that piece of media, from the palette whenever you were done. So if I upload that, it's uploading it. And now you see the images right there. I'm not going to save it, but you could give it a short description for alt tags, for ADA compliance, that kind of a thing. But yeah, I can walk you through that whole process. So yeah, the long and the short of it is that yes, you can. You can create any type of question that you want in here. It would just require a little bit of, my calendar's popping up. You guys get to see everything I'm doing today. But yes, you can build any type of question that you want in here. Some of them are easier to complete, others not so easy, but you can definitely do it. But again, that would require sort of like a one-on-one tutorial. I'd give you, I have two things. I have the actual video of me doing it step by step so that you can pause and then try it yourself, and then pause and then try it yourself, step by step. And I also have like the written steps, that you can use.
All right, so we are at just over 2 p.m. Here in Eastern Standard Time, and that's sort of the end of our hour. If it's okay with you, Bill, maybe if you had I don't know, is there anything else that you'd have to leave with our audience? One last note?
Yeah, one last note is that if you haven't, I know some of you may have attended the other session that I gave on Connect, but what I would love to just show you only from an observation of just looking at the course itself. I have this course complete with labs, both virtual labs for physiology and the APR, Anatomy and Physiology Dissection Labs. I have all of those already pre-built. And if you would like me to share this entire course with you, that you could just kind of like, experiment with, try it out as a student would see it. And then if there were certain things that you liked, you could easily, duplicate the course, delete what you didn't want to deliver to your students, or hide it, right? Because everything that's in here, is hideable, right? So with one click, now you can't see it, so, and then that way you could make the course your own. You could even add additional assignments if you wanted, or additional types of assignments. So if anybody wants, this course template for A&P1, A&P2, I have it for McKinley and Saladin, depending on you want. And I think even Holes, the new edition of Hole, the 16th edition. So I have those three texts that, once again, that have, you'll see that the physiology is there, the physiology labs, as well as the dissection labs, right? They're all complete with, you know, what I would consider some great lectures from, you know, web sources, you know, students can have access to. And also there's a reading assignment, a homework assignment, and a quiz. So that's all baked into the course. And if you would like to review it, like to have access to it, let Laura know, and I'll be happy to. I think, Laura, you have a couple of them, right, that you could send out?
I can absolutely do that on everyone's behalf. So if you guys, as Bill is saying, Holes, McKinley, or Saladin, if you'd like, and it's already saying yes, please. So I'll make sure that I send that your way. But they really are, you know, I like to brand them as Bill's gold standard courses. They really are. You know, Bill, again, is a chair of anatomy and physiology. He's got 40 people underneath him, and, you know, he's not the only one using these gold standard courses. I will say that they do go, they're very well planned. The pedagogy is there. So, you know, yeah, we're very happy to share Bill's teaching resources to help you in your fall 2021 courses and beyond as well.
Yeah. And even the, you know, the other lab types, I have tutorials for those, you know, so
yeah,
that comes with the course. You won't have to, you know, create, you know, those, they're already built in.
Absolutely. So I do just want to respect everyone's time. Bill, if it's okay with you, I'm just going to throw my last slide up just so everyone can get my contact information, just in case. Let me see here.
So you should be able to open yours now.
Go back to my slide here. And yeah, so, you know, again, it's a wrap. I want to thank everyone for coming out today. Bill, thank you so much, as always, for facilitating such a great event today. Again, to our audience members who took time out of your busy schedule, I know that it's the end of our winter terms here in Canada. So it's a busy time for you all as you're looking to wrap up and also planning ahead for fall 2021. And as Bill said, you know, for any information on his gold standard courses, if you want to connect with Bill personally for, you know, a quick 15-minute tutorial, or even if you wanted to connect with any of our digital success consultants, please feel free to email me. My email is on the screen here. It's laura.gurgley@mheducation.com. So again, thank you so much to everyone for coming out. And I hope that you have a really good end to your semester and that you all keep well and safe. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.